The mining drill had been quiet for exactly 14 seconds when the sky exploded with wings. Danny Foster dropped his coffee mug and watched it shatter across the dusty ground, but he couldn't look away from what was happening above him. Something massive was falling through the orange clouds of Keras 7, and it definitely wasn't a supply shuttle. The other miners started running. Danny heard someone screaming to get inside, heard the emergency sirens start their wailing cry, but his boots stayed planted in the red dirt like they'd grown roots. He'd been working this remote outpost for 2 years, and in all that time, he'd never seen anything like this. The creature hit the ground hard enough to make the earth shake. Dust exploded outward in a massive cloud that turned the air thick and red. Danny threw his arm across his face, coughing, squinting through the chaos. When the dust started to settle, his brain tried and failed to make sense of what he was seeing. A dragon. An honest-to-God dragon, right there in front of him. Danny had seen the briefing videos when he first arrived on Keras 7. Grainy footage of massive winged creatures circling distant mountains, always staying far from human settlements. The company line was simple: they're here, we're here, everybody stays in their own lane. Don't approach them, don't bother them, definitely don't try to make friends. Just another alien species on another frontier planet, nothing special. But this was different. This was very, very different. The dragon was the size of a small building, covered in scales that shimmered deep purple and silver even under all that dust. Her wings were torn and bleeding. Her breathing came in harsh, ragged gasps that Danny could hear from 50 yards away. And she was making a sound that made his chest hurt to hear it. A low, mournful wailing that sounded exactly like crying. That's when Danny saw what she was holding. Cradled in her front claws, protected even as she crashed, was something smaller. Another dragon, just a baby, lying completely still. His comm unit crackled to life. Foster. Danny Foster, get your rear end inside right now. That was his supervisor, Tom Mitchell, and he sounded terrified. That thing could fry you where you stand. But Danny wasn't moving. He was watching the mother dragon, watching how carefully she held that tiny body, watching how her whole massive form was curved protectively around her baby even though she was clearly hurt bad herself. He'd seen that posture before. Not on an alien, but on every parent who'd ever carried a sick kid into the medical station back on Earth where he'd trained. The dragon's head turned toward him. Her eyes were huge and golden, ancient-looking, filled with an intelligence that made Danny's breath catch. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Human and dragon. Two completely different species, separated by millions of years of evolution. Then, moving so slowly and carefully it was almost painful to watch, the mother dragon lowered her baby to the ground. She placed the small body in the dirt between them, then gently, deliberately, pushed it toward Danny with one massive claw. The movement was unmistakable. She was asking for help. Danny's training kicked in before his common sense could stop him. He walked forward, pulling his medical scanner from his belt, his hands already moving through the familiar routine even though nothing about this situation was familiar at all. Behind him, he could hear Tom yelling through the comm, could hear other voices shouting warnings, but they all faded into background noise. He knelt beside the baby dragon and ran his scanner over its body. The readings made his stomach drop. The little creature was barely alive. Massive systemic poisoning, multiple organ failures, heart rate critically low and getting lower. Whatever had happened to this baby, it was bad. Really bad. Danny looked up at the mother dragon. She was watching him with an intensity that was almost overwhelming, her golden eyes never blinking, never looking away. There was so much emotion in that alien face. Fear. Hope. Desperation. The same emotions he'd seen on 1,000 human faces in emergency rooms and field hospitals. He realized something then. Pain was universal. Love was universal. The terror of watching your child die, that was universal too. It didn't matter that she had scales instead of skin, wings instead of arms. She was a mother, and her baby was dying, and she'd come to the only place she thought might help. The baby dragon's breathing was getting shallower. Danny could see its small chest barely moving. Minutes, maybe. That's all the time they had. He looked back up at the mother, at those ancient golden eyes still fixed on him with desperate hope, and he made a decision that would change everything. Not just for him, not just for this outpost, but for 2 entire species. Okay, Danny said quietly, even though he knew she probably couldn't understand the words. He hoped she'd understand his tone, the determination in it. Okay, I'll try. I'll do everything I can. He stood up and gestured toward the outpost building. The baby needed to get inside, needed equipment he didn't have out here in the open. The mother dragon was way too big to fit through the doors, but maybe she'd understand. She did. She made a sound, softer this time, almost like a question. Danny nodded and carefully lifted the baby dragon in his arms. It was heavier than it looked, its scales warm against his skin. He could feel its heart beating, faint and irregular, like a clock winding down. The mother dragon watched him carry her baby toward the building. She didn't attack, didn't protest, just watched with those impossibly expressive eyes. As Danny reached the airlock, he looked back one more time. The massive dragon had moved closer to the building, positioning herself right outside the main window where she could see inside. She pressed one claw against the reinforced glass, gentle despite her size. Then she made that crying sound again, softer now. It didn't need translation. Please. Please save my baby. Danny nodded once more, then carried the dying dragon inside, knowing he just made a promise he had no idea how to keep. The airlock doors sealed behind Danny with a hiss that felt way too final. He carried the baby dragon through the narrow corridor, past storage rooms and equipment lockers, toward the small medical bay that suddenly seemed completely inadequate for what he was trying to do. Lisa Grant, the outpost's engineer, nearly dropped her tablet when she saw what he was carrying. "Are you out of your mind?" she whispered, but she was already moving to help him. That was the thing about Lisa. She might complain, might point out every single way something could go wrong, but when someone needed help, she never hesitated. They cleared the medical table in seconds, shoving aside equipment meant for treating mining accidents and radiation burns. The baby dragon was heavier than Danny expected, its body radiating heat like a furnace. They laid it down as gently as possible, and Danny immediately started connecting sensors, trying to adapt human medical equipment to something completely alien. Through the window, the mother dragon's massive face appeared, her golden eyes tracking every movement. She was close enough that her breath fogged the reinforced glass. Close enough that if she wanted to, one swipe of her claw could probably tear through the wall. But she just watched, utterly still except for the slight movements of her breathing. "Talk to me, Danny," Lisa said, pulling up the scan results on the main screen. "What are we looking at?" Danny studied the readings, his trained eye picking apart the data even though half of it made no sense. The baby dragon's biology was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its organs were arranged differently, its blood chemistry was completely foreign, and right in the center of its chest was something that made him stop and stare. "Is that its heart?" Lisa asked, zooming in on the holographic display. "I think so." The organ looked like a crystal, intricate and beautiful, with geometric patterns that pulsed with faint light. Except the light was getting dimmer, and dark cracks were spreading through the crystalline structure like a spider web. "I've never seen anything like this." "That's because you haven't," said a new voice. Tom Mitchell stood in the doorway, looking tired and worried. "I pulled up everything we have on dragon biology from the Colonial database. Which is basically nothing useful. They don't share their medical information with anyone, and nobody's ever been close enough to study them." Danny's comm unit buzzed. Then buzzed again. He ignored it, focusing on the scan results. The baby was getting worse. Its breathing was becoming more labored, the crystal heart flickering like a candle about to go out. The comm unit switched to emergency broadcast. "Danny Foster, this is Regional Director Hayes. Respond immediately." Lisa reached over and turned on the speaker. A man's voice filled the room, sharp with authority and barely controlled panic. "Foster, I'm ordering an immediate evacuation of the outpost. We're sending shuttles now. Everyone needs to be off that rock in the next 2 hours." "Can't do that, sir," Danny said, not looking away from the baby dragon. His hands were already moving, trying to establish an 4-line even though he had no idea what fluids would be safe for dragon biology. That wasn't a request, it was an order. Dragons are extremely dangerous when provoked. If that creature's offspring dies while in human care, the mother will likely destroy your entire facility and everyone in it. We have historical records of dragons burning entire settlements to the ground for lesser offenses. Danny finally looked up at the window. The mother dragon was still there, still watching. Her eyes met his, and he saw no rage in them. Just fear. Just hope. Just the desperate plea of a parent watching their child slip away. "Then I better make sure it doesn't die," Danny said quietly. There was a long silence on the other end. When Hayes spoke again, his voice was harder. "Foster, I'm trying to save lives here. Including yours. Be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. There's a patient in front of me who needs help. I'm a medic. This is what I do." Danny checked the monitors again. The baby's heart rate was dropping. They were running out of time for this conversation. "You're a mining outpost medic, not a xenobiologist. You're not equipped for this. You don't even know what you're dealing with. You're right, I don't. But I'm going to figure it out, because that's my job. That's what I signed up for when I took the oath. Help anyone who needs it, regardless of who or what they are. Foster, I'm ordering you to evacuate. If you refuse, there will be consequences. Your career, your certifications, everything. Danny looked at the baby dragon, at its labored breathing, at the crystal heart growing dimmer by the minute. He looked at Lisa, who nodded once, already pulling up medical databases on her tablet. He looked at Tom, who sighed and started shutting the door to the medical bay. I can live with those consequences, Danny said. What I can't live with is walking away from someone who needs help. He reached over and switched off the comm unit completely, cutting off Hayes mid-protest. Well, Tom said, leaning against the closed door. You just ended your career. Hope you know what you're doing. I don't, Danny admitted. He pulled up the scan of the poison in the baby's system. The readout was terrifying. Military-grade toxin, specifically designed to target dragon biology. He'd seen reports of poachers using weapons like this, illegal throughout the entire sector but still showing up on black market channels. But I've got to try anyway. Lisa was already cross-referencing the poison's chemical signature with everything in their database. This stuff is nasty. It's breaking down cellular structures at the molecular level, but it's specifically targeting the crystalline components. That heart, those are its primary target. Can we synthesize an antitoxin? Danny asked, already knowing the answer would be complicated. Maybe. Possibly. I don't know. Lisa pulled up molecular models, her engineering brain already working the problem. Would need to understand how that crystal heart works first. Is it biological? Mineral? Something in between? Danny studied the scans, watching the faint pulses of light moving through the crystal lattice. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. This tiny creature had something humans didn't, something unique and precious, and it was dying right in front of him. Outside the window, the mother dragon made a soft sound. Not the terrible crying from before, but something quieter. A question, maybe. Or encouragement. Danny looked at her and nodded, even though he had no idea if he could keep the promise he was making. Okay, he said, rolling up his sleeves. We've got maybe 12 hours before this baby's heart stops completely. Let's figure out how to save a life that no human has ever saved before. Lisa pulled up a chair, her fingers already flying across her tablet. Tom grabbed coffee from the dispenser, settling in for a long night. Through the window, the mother dragon kept her vigil, waiting. And Danny got to work, racing against a clock that was ticking down toward heartbreak or hope. He wasn't sure which yet. 16 hours. That's how long Danny had been awake, staring at screens and mixing compounds and running simulations that kept failing. His eyes burned. His hands shook from too much coffee and not enough food. The baby dragon's breathing had gotten worse, each breath a struggle that Danny felt in his own chest. Lisa had crashed on the couch 2 hours ago, her tablet still clutched in her hands. Tom was making another pot of coffee, the fifth or sixth one that night. Nobody was talking much anymore. They tried everything they could think of, and nothing was working. The crystal heart was still dying. Slower now, because Danny had managed to rig up a basic life support system, but dying all the same. The dark cracks spreading through its structure were like watching ice break on a frozen lake. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. Through the window, the mother dragon hadn't moved. Hadn't slept. Just watched with those golden eyes that seemed to look right through Danny's excuses and doubts straight into his soul. Danny rubbed his face and looked at the scans for what felt like the millionth time. The poison was sophisticated, designed by someone who understood dragon biology way better than he did. It targeted the crystalline structures specifically, breaking down the molecular bonds that held them together. He'd synthesized 3 different antitoxins already, but none of them could reach the heart. The crystal structure was too dense, too complex. Anything he injected just pooled around the outside, useless. He needed a way to get the antitoxin inside the crystal itself. Needed to somehow inject it directly into that lattice structure without shattering the whole thing. But how do you inject something into solid crystal? Danny stood up, needing to move, needing to think differently. He walked past the medical equipment, past the monitors showing the baby's declining vitals, past the window where the mother dragon tracked him with her gaze. He found himself in the corridor, staring at nothing, his brain too tired to make sense of anything anymore. That's when he saw it. Through the open door of the mining equipment room, the laser array sitting on its charging station. They used it every day for cutting through crystal formations in the mines, Precision work that required splitting rock without destroying the valuable minerals inside. Precision cuts. Controlled energy. Reshaping crystal without breaking it. Danny's brain suddenly snapped into focus like someone had flipped a switch. Lisa. He was running back to the medical bay, his exhaustion forgotten. Lisa, wake up. She jerked awake, nearly dropping her tablet. What? What's wrong? The mining lasers. We use them to work with crystals, right? Controlled energy pulses that can cut and reshape crystalline structures without shattering them. Lisa blinked, her engineer brain catching up. Yeah, but those are for mining. For rocks. Not for living tissue. But the heart is crystalline. It's biological, sure, but it's still basically a living crystal structure. Danny was pulling up the laser specifications on the screen, his hands moving fast. What if we modify the array? Use it to create microchannels through the crystal matrix, then pulse the antitoxin through those channels using the same focused energy. Tom had stopped mid-pour, coffee forgotten. That's completely insane. I know, Danny said, already running calculations. We'd have to modify the frequency, adjust the power output, calibrate it perfectly. One mistake and we destroy the heart completely. So basically surgery using a mining tool on an alien life form we don't understand, with zero margin for error. Lisa was already moving though, pulling up the laser specifications on her tablet. Yeah, that's insane. Let's do it. The next hour was chaos. Danny worked on synthesizing a new antitoxin, one that could be carried through crystal using energy pulses. Lisa reconfigured the mining laser, turning industrial equipment into the most improvised medical device in human history. Tom ran between them, fetching tools and components, keeping coffee flowing, making sure nobody forgot to breathe. The baby dragon kept getting worse. Its breathing was so shallow now that Danny had to watch carefully to see if its chest was moving at all. The crystal heart flickered like a dying star. Finally, Lisa stepped back from the modified laser. This is as good as I can make it. The frequency is calibrated for crystalline structures matching what we're seeing in the scans. The energy output should be enough to create pathways without causing fractures. Should be. Should be, Danny repeated. He looked at the device in his hands. It looked wrong, cobbled together from mining equipment and medical supplies, held together with determination and desperate hope. There's no way to test this, is there? Not unless you want to practice on the baby dragon that's already dying, Tom said quietly. Danny nodded. He picked up the modified laser injector, loaded it with the antitoxin he'd synthesized, and walked to the medical table. His hands were steady now. That was the weird thing about emergency medicine. Once you committed to a course of action, the fear went away. Your training took over, and your hands knew what to do even when your brain was screaming that this was impossible. He looked up at the window. The mother dragon was pressed against the glass now, her massive face filling the entire frame. Her eyes were locked on her baby, on Danny's hands, on the strange device he was holding. I don't know if you understand me, Danny said, his voice rough from exhaustion and emotion. But I'm going to try to save your daughter now. This might work. Or it might not. But I promise you, I'm going to give her every chance I've got. The dragon made a sound, soft and low. Danny chose to believe it meant she understood. He positioned the laser injector over the baby's chest, right above the dying crystal heart. The scanners showed him exactly where to aim, exactly where the cracks were spreading, exactly where the poison was concentrated. He had one shot at this. One chance to thread a needle while the needle was breaking apart. Here we go, Danny whispered. He pressed the injector against the baby's scales and activated it. The laser pulsed, invisible to the naked eye but visible on the monitors as a stream of focused energy carrying the antitoxin deep into the crystal heart. The baby dragon's body went rigid. Its back arched. A sound came from its throat, something between a cry and a gasp. Then it stopped moving. Completely still. The monitors flatlined. Through the window, the mother dragon roared. The sound was so loud, so full of anguish, that the entire building shook. Equipment rattled. Coffee mugs fell from the counter and shattered. Danny's ears rang with the force of it. No, he breathed, staring at the flat lines on the monitor. No, come on. Come on. Lisa grabbed his arm. Danny, look. Look at the heart. He tore his eyes from the monitor and looked at the baby dragon's chest. Deep inside, barely visible through the scales, something flickered. Once. Twice. A tiny pulse of light in the crystal structure. Then another pulse. Stronger this time. The cracks in the crystal started to glow. Not breaking apart, but sealing. The antitoxin was spreading through the lattice, carried by the energy pulses, repairing the damage as it went. The baby dragon gasped. Its eyes opened, glowing the same golden color as its mother's. It took a breath. A real breath, deep and strong. The monitors came back to life, showing a heartbeat. Weak, but steady. Getting stronger. Outside, the mother dragon's roar changed. Not anguish now, but something else entirely. Joy. Pure, overwhelming joy that made the windows rattle and brought tears streaming down Danny's face. The baby dragon lifted its head, looking around with confused eyes. It made a small chirping sound, like a bird. Like something innocent and alive and absolutely not dying anymore. Danny laughed. He couldn't help it. The sound came out half sob, half pure relief. Lisa was crying too, and Tom was gripping the counter like his legs might give out. The baby dragon turned its head and looked at Danny. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Human and dragon. Doctor and patient. Then the little creature made that chirping sound again and very gently touched Danny's hand with its nose. "You're welcome," Danny whispered. 3 days after the surgery, Danny was sitting outside the outpost watching the baby dragon try to fly. She wasn't very good at it yet. Every attempt ended with her tumbling back to the ground in a tangle of wings and tail, making frustrated chirping sounds that somehow managed to be adorable even coming from a creature with scales and claws. The mother dragon, Thyra, watched her daughter with what Danny had learned to recognize as amusement. He'd learned her name on the second day, when she'd brought something that looked like a metal disc covered in intricate symbols. Lisa had identified it as a translation device, technology so advanced it made their own equipment look like stone tools. "Her name is Ember," Thyra's voice came through the translator, deep and resonant like distant thunder. "She burns bright, even when the world tries to extinguish her." Danny smiled, watching Ember charge across the red dirt and launch herself into the air again. She made it about 10 feet before gravity remembered she existed. "She's stubborn. I like that. She gets it from me." Thyra shifted her massive bulk, settling more comfortably on the ground. Her wounds had healed quickly, faster than Danny would have thought possible. "You saved her life, Danny Foster. This is not a small thing among my people. It is, in fact, unprecedented." That word again. Unprecedented. Danny had been hearing it a lot over the past few days. From Tom, from Lisa, from the increasingly frantic messages Director Hayes kept sending that Danny kept ignoring. Apparently humans and dragons just didn't do this. Didn't help each other. Didn't interact beyond wary observation from a distance. "Why?" Danny asked. "I mean, you're clearly intelligent. We're intelligent. Why have we been avoiding each other?" Thyra was quiet for a long moment. Ember had given up on flying and was now attempting to climb a supply crate, her tiny claws scraping against the metal. "Fear," Thyra finally said. "Misunderstanding. Pride. The usual reasons species fail to connect. Your people came to our worlds with weapons and machines. We assumed you saw us as obstacles or resources. We withdrew to our territories. You stayed in yours. It was easier than trying to build bridges." "Seems like a waste," Danny said. "It was. It is." Thyra lowered her massive head until she was eye level with Danny. This close, he could see the intricate patterns in her scales, could feel the heat radiating from her body. "But you changed that. When you saw my daughter dying, you didn't see an obstacle or a resource. You saw a child who needed help. That is rare, Danny Foster. Rarer than you know." Over the next week, Thyra started teaching Danny things no human had ever learned. She explained dragon biology in detail, how their crystal hearts worked, how they processed energy differently than mammals. She showed him healing techniques her people had developed over thousands of years. She shared star charts marking dragon territories across dozens of planets, trade routes, sacred sites, nursery worlds where young dragons learned to fly. Lisa recorded everything, her engineer brain practically vibrating with excitement. Tom stopped complaining about the policy violations and started asking questions about dragon metallurgy. Even Director Hayes eventually stopped threatening to fire everyone and started asking if they could possibly arrange an official meeting. But the most important lessons weren't about biology or technology. They were smaller, quieter things. The way Ember would curl up next to Danny when she got tired, her scales warm against his leg. The way Thyra would hum old dragon songs while her daughter slept, melodies that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The way 3 different species, human and dragon and whatever Lisa counted as when she was deep in a technical problem, could just exist together peacefully. "Your people have a saying, Thyra said one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Ember was practicing her flying again, doing better now, staying airborne for almost a minute at a time. About walking a mile in another's shoes? Yeah, Danny said. It means trying to understand someone else's perspective. Seeing the world the way they see it. We have something similar. An old proverb that translates roughly as flight shared is wisdom gained. Thyra watched her daughter soar, watched her circle and dive and laugh with pure joy. I thought I understood your species. I thought you were focused only on expansion, on taking, on using. I was wrong. To be fair, a lot of humans are like that, Danny admitted. We're not perfect. Not even close. Neither are dragons. We have our own prejudices, our own failures. Thyra's golden eyes reflected the sunset. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps wisdom comes not from being perfect, but from choosing to help each other despite our imperfections. Ember landed, not gracefully but without crashing, and chirped triumphantly. Danny applauded, and the little dragon puffed out her chest with pride. She bounded over, still clumsy on the ground, and presented Danny with something she'd found. A crystal, small and perfectly formed, glowing faintly in the fading light. She wants you to have it, Thyra said softly. From her horde. It's the highest honor a dragon can give. She's claiming you as family. Danny took the crystal carefully, feeling its weight, its warmth. I don't know what to say. Say you'll remember this. When things get complicated, when humans and dragons start negotiating territories and trade agreements and all the messy political things that happen when species interact, remember this moment. Remember that it started with compassion. With one human who saw a mother's tears and decided to help. The poachers, Danny said suddenly. The ones who hurt Ember. Are they going to come back? Thyra's expression changed. Her eyes went cold in a way that made Danny remember she was a predator, a creature who could probably level this entire outpost if she wanted to. They will. Poachers always return to profitable hunting grounds. They think dragons are easy targets, especially our young. Then we need to do something about it. We? You would help us with this. Thyra sounded surprised. Danny looked at Ember, who was now trying to teach Lisa how to roar properly. The engineer gave me attempting dragon vocalizations that came out more like squeaks. He thought about the past week, about everything he'd learned, about how wrong he'd been to think humans and dragons had nothing to offer each other. You're family now, he said simply. That's what family does. They help each other. Thyra made a sound Danny had learned meant deep emotion. Then we will face them together. And perhaps we will teach these poachers what happens when you threaten the ones we love. In the distance, more shapes appeared in the sky. Dragons, dozens of them, responding to Thyra's call. They circled the outpost, not threatening, just present. A statement. A promise. Danny watched them and smiled. Director Hayes was going to have a stroke when he saw this. But somehow, Danny couldn't bring himself to care. He had a family to protect. And apparently, family came in all shapes, sizes, and species. The poachers made their biggest mistake on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after Danny had saved Ember's life. They came in fast, their ship dropping out of the clouds like they owned the place, scanners probably lighting up with dragon signatures all over the area. Easy targets, they must have thought. A bunch of dragons hanging around a human outpost, distracted, vulnerable. They'd hit similar spots before, dropped their poison nets, harvested scales and crystal hearts, and disappeared before anyone could respond. But this time was different. Danny was standing outside with Ember when the ship appeared. The young dragon had finally mastered flying and was showing off, doing loops and barrel rolls that would have been impossible a week ago. She froze mid-air when she saw the ship, her whole body going rigid with recognition and fear. Thyra's roar split the morning air. It wasn't a sound of pain or grief this time. It was a battle cry, and it was answered by dozens of other dragons circling above. But they didn't attack. They just surrounded the poacher ship, cutting off every escape route, and waited. Danny activated his comm unit. He'd been practicing this speech for days, had written it down and rewritten it about 50 times. His hands were shaking, but his voice came out steady. Attention unidentified vessel. This is Danny Foster, official liaison between the Human Colonial Authority and the Dragon Clans of Keras 7. You are in violation of approximately 37 different galactic laws, and we have evidence linking your ship to illegal poaching operations across 6 systems. There was silence from the poacher ship. Danny could imagine them staring at their screens, trying to figure out what was happening. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Lisa stood beside him, tablet in hand, broadcasting everything they'd collected over the past 2 weeks. Thyra had been very thorough. She'd brought records, evidence, testimonies from other dragon clans who'd lost family members to poachers. She'd even tracked down serial numbers from weapons, traced them back to manufacturers, built a case that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. You have 2 options, Danny continued. Option 1, you surrender peacefully. We've already transmitted all evidence to the Galactic Trade Commission, the Colonial Defense Force, and about a dozen other agencies who are very interested in talking to you. Option 2, you try to run, and you deal with 3 dozen very angry dragons who are extremely motivated to make sure you never hurt anyone again. The poacher ship's engines fired up. They were going to run. 3 dragons moved faster than Danny's eyes could follow. They didn't breathe fire, didn't tear the ship apart. They just disabled the engines with surgical precision, their claws cutting through specific components that Lisa had identified. The ship dropped about 50 feet before emergency systems caught it, leaving it hovering helplessly in the air. I'd go with option 1 if I were you, Danny said into the comm. The poachers surrendered. The Colonial Defense Force showed up an hour later, along with Director Hayes and what looked like half the diplomatic corps. Hayes stepped off the shuttle, took one look at the scene, the dragons circling overhead, the poacher ship held immobile by claws and gravity, Danny standing there with a baby dragon perched on his shoulder, and just stopped walking. Foster, he said finally. What exactly have you done? Started a revolution, I think, Danny said. Ember chirped agreement, her tail wrapped around his arm for balance. The next few months were chaos. The good kind of chaos, mostly. Diplomats arrived, lawyers arrived, scientists arrived, all of them desperate to understand what was happening on this remote mining outpost. The poachers were prosecuted, their networks dismantled, their weapons traced and banned across multiple systems. But more importantly, humans and dragons started talking. Really talking. Not just avoiding each other or exchanging wary greetings from a distance, but actually communicating. Thyra became an ambassador for her people, traveling to human worlds, speaking at conferences, teaching anyone who'd listen about dragon culture and history. The Keras 7 outpost transformed completely. The mining operation didn't stop, but it became secondary to something bigger. Engineers worked with dragons to develop new technologies, combining human innovation with dragon knowledge accumulated over millennia. Medical teams studied dragon healing techniques, finding applications for human medicine. Teachers developed exchange programs, human children learning alongside young dragons. Danny's role changed too. He was still a medic, still treated injuries and illnesses, but now his patients came in all shapes and sizes. He set broken wings, treated scale infections, helped diagnose problems that no human doctor had ever encountered before. And he trained others, teaching them what he'd learned, spreading the knowledge that Thyra had shared. Ember grew stronger every day. Her crystal heart, the one Danny had saved with modified mining equipment and desperate hope, glowed brighter than any in her generation. Other dragons said it was because she carried something special now, a connection to another species forged in compassion and courage. Director Hayes never did fire Danny. In fact, he got a promotion, though Danny insisted on keeping his old title. I'm a medic, he'd say whenever someone tried to call him ambassador or liaison or any other fancy term. That's all I ever wanted to be. One evening, 6 months after everything started, Danny sat outside the outpost watching the sunset. It had become their routine, his and Thyra's. Ember was off playing with a group of young dragons and human kids, all of them racing and tumbling and laughing in a mix of chirps and shouts. They don't see the differences, Thyra observed, watching the children play. They just see friends. Kids are smart that way, Danny said. Adults spend so much time building walls, and kids just ignore them completely. Your species has a gift, Thyra said thoughtfully. You're young, as civilizations go. Impulsive. Reckless sometimes. But you have this capacity for compassion that transcends logic or self-interest. When you saw Ember dying, helping her didn't benefit you. It endangered you. But you did it anyway. Anyone would have done the same. No, Danny Foster. They wouldn't have. I've lived 3 of your lifetimes, traveled to dozens of worlds, met hundreds of species. Most would have calculated the risk and walked away. You calculated the risk and walked forward. That's the difference. That's what makes humans special. Danny thought about that. About the choice he'd made, kneeling in the red dirt with a dying baby dragon and a mother's desperate eyes watching him. It hadn't felt special at the time. It had just felt necessary, like breathing or bleeding or any other fundamental thing you do without thinking. Maybe, he said slowly, The real gift isn't compassion itself. Maybe it's the refusal to let fear win. The decision to help someone even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when you have no idea if it'll work. Perhaps that's the same thing, Thyra said. Ember came bounding over, breathless and happy, covered in dust and absolutely radiating joy. She flopped down between Danny and Thyra, her head in Danny's lap, already half asleep from playing so hard. Danny stroked her scales gently, feeling the warmth of her, the steady pulse of her crystal heart beating strong and healthy. He thought about the night he'd almost lost her, about the desperate surgery with improvised equipment, about all the ways it could have gone wrong. But it hadn't gone wrong. And now look at them. Two species, separated by evolution and culture and millions of years of history, sitting together watching the sunset like it was the most natural thing in the world. The galaxy was watching now. Other species were reaching out, cautiously, hopefully, wondering if maybe they'd been wrong to stay isolated. Wondering if maybe humans had something to teach them after all. Not about weapons or conquest or any of the things species usually measured themselves by. But about something simpler and infinitely more powerful. The courage to kneel beside a stranger's pain and say 3 simple words, "I'll help you." That was the real transformation. Not just for humans and dragons, but for everyone who heard the story. The reminder that compassion wasn't weakness. That helping others didn't diminish you. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was extend your hand to someone completely different and offer them hope. Danny looked at Ember, sleeping peacefully, and smiled. Yeah, that was pretty special after all.